So 1984 was also at the start of a rather large event in my life, which resulted from the diary I'd kept during the Falklands War, which I had given to an oppo, a friend on the submarine, whose father was a very well-known London publisher, because I had thought, well, it might make a good book. So I had lent it to this fellow, Simon O'Keefe, who, without my knowledge, took it to the House of Commons and showed it to the Labour Member of Parliament, Tam Dalyell.
I know that, remember that name, yeah.
Right. He did it without my knowing, because of his genuine feelings that the war should never have taken place. You know, we killed 323 people on our submarine alone. He returned the diary to me several months later with a small note saying my father thought it was, you know, very well written, and with a few suggestions of what I should do if I wanted to publish her. However, 1984, that was in 1983. He'd actually flown out here and sailed with me in the summer of 1983. So in 84, first of all, a friend of mine who actually became the secretary to the Speaker of the House of Commons, Captain Angus Sinclair, another submariner, old friend of mine, wrote to me in, I believe, March of 84, and said we were in close touch, and he said he had seen something in, I think, the Guardian newspaper, but he said, but I don't think it's yours, an extract of an officer's diary from the war. But he said, it's not your style of writing, Seth. But then somebody else said something a few months later, I can't remember what. But to get to the point, I was sitting in my ship's container office in St Lucia in, I think, October or thereabouts, 1984, November. And there was a knock on the door, and a rather tall, very white fellow, obviously recently arrived, tapped on the door in a suit and said, "Are you Narendra Setia?" And I thought, shit, it's the police. Because there had been already a few articles and papers coming out that the police were searching, and I was starting to get a little nervous. It turned out that he was Stuart Preble, the producer of the series World in Action.
Oh, yeah.
The investigative journalism program. We chatted. I started to relax. I was very cautious with what I said to him when he asked me questions. But after a while, he said to me, look, he convinced me that I needed to do something to protect my name and, you know, to get rid of these false suspicions that I had been somehow involved in something untoward. So he flew me back to the UK. And actually, only a month ago, I got a copy of the TV program that was made out of it.
Oh, right.
So if you're interested, yes, I lost it. It was a half-hour World in Action program. It came out in early December 1984. If you want, I'll organize to send you that later.
Yeah,
you have to do it through a thing called WeTransfer. So it only, okay.
Yeah.
So we flew back to England, we made the program, and the articles that were coming out had started in mid-November from the Observer newspaper. They printed 4 articles in total each week, and at first not naming me, but eventually suggesting that I had stolen the logbooks.
Oh.
The submarine, which Michael Heseltine had announced had disappeared. And, you know, when Tam Dalyell had been questioning Heseltine, et cetera, et cetera. And the first thing that happened is a lot of people confused logbook with my diary. And so that was one of the reasons why the suspicion was put onto me for allegedly stealing the submarine's logbooks.
Right.
The other reasons, which came out much later, and in fact are about to come out within the next couple of months, because there's a 6-series podcast coming out this spring. I had the editor and producer of the London Review of Books here last September.
Oh, wow.
And apparently, after 40 years, government classified documents that have been released by the government have apparently shown that I'm afraid that my handwritten diary proves that the government lied to the British people and that the war need not have happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And in fact, we've just sold the movie rights as well.
Wow.
So I'm not getting much out of it. I get $1,500,
No,
buys a couple of beers.
yeah, yeah. You'll get $1,500, and then somebody else will get millions.
Yeah, exactly. But so this went on, and in February 1985, the Mail on Sunday, an article written by Chester Stern, wrote an article with the headline, and I still have all these newspaper cuttings: "Conqueror logs seized." Detective Chief Superintendent Hardy of the UK Serious Crime Squad from Scotland Yard and an assistant Sergeant Ashdown flew to the Caribbean, and they asked me where was my diary. When they asked me, it was actually by my feet under my desk in the office,
Yeah.
my original diary.
Yeah.
But I told them I'd thrown it overboard because of all the publicity, didn't want it any longer, so I fibbed. And in fact, today it's with the friends, survivors, and families of the General Belgrano, the museum in Buenos Aires. I sent it to them 11 years ago.
Wow.
And so Hardy, of course, didn't get the diary or anything else, but he then said to me, "Is there anything belonging to the government that I have?" Well, yes, I had 2 orange waterproof bags that had been used in RAF mail drops when we were on the way home on the surface.
Yeah.
I had a book called The Sailmaker's Handbook, unclassified, and I had 3 charts of northern Spain and Portugal that the submarine's navigator, Commander John T. Towers, had given to me. They were unclassified. And in the Navy, every month, unclassified charts that were beyond a certain date would be burnt.
Right.
Burnt, not given away or sold, burnt.
Yeah, burnt. Yeah.
And so he'd given them to me. And 3 of the charts were actually, there was a restaurant in St Lucia called the Chart House, and a friend of mine had started it and owned it, and they were actually glued to the tabletops. So the police came with me, I mean, yes, hilarious, to the restaurant and photographed the tabletops in the Chart House restaurant. But Hardy was then able to go back home and tell people, not dishonestly, that he had recovered certain navigational documents. And that, of course, put 2 and 2 together and got 5 for Chester Stern at the Mail on Sunday. So I started a lawsuit. I didn't have any money. I was earning $120 US a week, skippering and doing work with this yacht charter company, and I had nothing in the bank. But I thought, bugger it, I'm a bit of a stubborn Torian, and I said, no, I'm going to sue them. I wrote to all the friends that I knew and acquaintances, about 40 or 50 of them, and said, can you lend me £1,000 each? And if I win the court cases, I'll pay you back immediately with interest. And if I don't, at some stage, I'll do my best. I ended up getting £12,000.
Wow.
For my lawsuit. Yeah.
Wow.
So with that, I started the lawsuit. I'll try and make this quick, but I mean, it was a very, very lengthy process. And the newspapers tried to make me put £100,000 security for costs because I was no longer resident in the UK.
Yeah.
We went to the High Court over it, and my solicitor was an old friend of the fellow I'd sailed across the Atlantic with, and he was into housing, not this. But he and I had the best libel barrister in Britain, Patrick Milmo, whose father had actually interviewed Kim Philby, Sir Helenus Milmo.
Wow. Yeah.
And Patrick Milmo was an amazing barrister. And anyway, they won.
Wow.
So to get to the point again, in 1987, it finally got up for a hell of a lot of hassle of doing it, and I was in a real state. We got to the High Court. I flew back to London. I only had 2 jackets and 2 pairs of trousers, and I wasn't rich, and stayed with friends in London. And it was in the High Court of Justice in the Strand, court number 13. And the trial lasted for 3 weeks, and it was grueling. And there was a jury there, and they found in my favor. And I was awarded the 2nd biggest libel case in British history.
Wow.
And
fantastic.
£260,000. There was immediately an argument from the defence that I could do a runner overseas and spend all the money. In which case, if they appealed, and they won the appeal, the amount might be reduced to £10,000.
Mm.
But the judge was very clearly on my side. He was an ex-RAF chap and all the rest of it, Sir Leslie Boreham.
Mm.
And so he gave me 160,000, and they retained 120 for costs for a future lawsuit.
Mm.
I have always been a bit of a waster, and I suddenly had all this money, so I went out of a one-bedroom rented apartment in St Lucia and went into a two-bedroom one with a small pool and a little bit of garden. And my mother was pretty penniless as well. She lived in Barbados, but lived off her pension. And so she hadn't been to India for years, and India was her second life, her soul and heart from her husband, my father. So I flew her and a friend of mine to India, first class, and we toured India, and also spent time with the founder of the Indian Socialist Party, who was my uncle, a surrogate uncle.
Yeah.
He founded the Indian Socialist Party and was known as the Lion of Satara in World War II. He didn't kill people, but he used to get rid of the British by doing funny things and make the British think that they were there or there or there.
Yeah.
He was an amazing man, Achut Padwurden, and so we spent time with him. I went back to St Lucia and drank a lot of wine. And in 1989, our company, which had been verging on bankruptcy, had been sort of taken over by an Englishman who had lived in America most of his life, David Young, and who was an only child in London and a very good accountant. And he'd taken over our yacht charter company, but I fell out with him. And so I'd bought another yacht, because the original yacht I sailed over from, I got £1,000. I sold my share to the other fellow that I sailed with. So I bought a 43-foot ferrocement yacht. And in August 1988, when 89, when I walked away from the company, I decided I'm going to set sail for Panama. So my two friends, German, came with me, a guy and his girlfriend. And to cut a long story short, I thought, shit, I'd better go back to St Lucia. We went down to Bonaire and Curacao and places like that. But I had to go back to St Lucia because I hadn't taken any of my stuff. My rental house was still there, so I thought I better put my things in order. So we sailed back up, but in order to get to St Lucia, I had to go north through the Virgin Islands and then back down because of the wind direction. And we ended up in the middle of a Category 5 hurricane, right overhead in the St Croix. A short story has been published in the book about it. It's called Surviving Hugo. Hurricane Hugo, 18th September 1989. We had winds gusting to 220 miles an hour while we were on board.
Wow.
I lost both masts, hole in the deck. We had water up to almost our shoulders inside the yacht at night time. And we managed to escape by crawling onto a large motor trawler that he'd got caught up with, was actually owned by a Coast Guard officer. And we survived and spent the night there. I still have a few photographs of Hugo. It was pretty horrific. So I lost the yacht and ended up back in St Lucia. Somebody came up and took us down by yacht. I was still going to walk out of the company. I had a shareholding certificate and I cut it into pieces. It was, I think, 39% of the company. And I cut it up in front of the guy that I had walked out on, who owned the company, the chairman, and said, there you are, that obviously means more to you than me, and flung my shareholding at him. And with the money I had left and the claim that I got from the loss of my yacht in the hurricane, I then bought a 28-foot steel yacht and single-handed it myself. I sailed from the Virgin Islands, British Virgin Islands, right the way down the chain of the Caribbean on my own, and stopped in St Lucia and thought I'll take a break. And on the break, me and a friend tried to hitchhike from England to India, but he went home when we were in Greece. I got as far as Turkey, but when I went to get my visa to go through Iran, the Ayatollahs there looked at me at the embassy and said, go to your own country to get visa. So I thought, fuck that. So I went and smoked a pipe down a back street in Istanbul, and then made it back home.
Mm.
Got back to St Lucia and then continued my sail south and ended up in Venezuela. I went to Puerto La Cruz, which was then a well-known yachting harbor there. And again, I was out of money, and I got a job cleaning an American chap's large 70-foot yacht that he was captaining for a rich owner. And I got paid $8 a day and a bite to eat. And in Venezuela in those days, that was enough for cigarettes, booze, meals, and a little bit of change. But then one day I met a couple, an American couple in the dockyard, who had driven a Jeep all the way around South America for a year, an Isuzu, like a Suzuki. It had iron grills on it and a safe, and proper locks, security, because South America has to be a little bit careful.
Yeah.
And they wanted $2,500 for it. So I borrowed $1,250 from each of my brothers and promised to pay him back. Told him I was going to start a taxi service. And I offered the clients, and I knew that they had to be out of the country within 4 days. So I told them I could afford 1,900. So they took it. So I had 600 change, got new shock absorbers, and bought myself dinner at a French restaurant and a nice bottle of wine. And I had a waist-length ponytail. And so then I thought Narendra is a difficult name for people to say in South America. So I changed my name to Carlos. And because of my complexion, a lot of people actually thought I was Colombian.
Oh, right.
Because I can speak a bit of Spanish, but rather formal Spanish, which is what the Colombians speak. Venezuelan Spanish is rather what you'd call vulgar. And so I became Carlos Taxi. And I spent 9 months driving everywhere in Venezuela, from north to south to the Brazilian border, Colombia, up to the Andes, where when you read the article, I did get the Britannic Majesty's consul rather relaxed on something known as LSD, I believe. And that's true. I had a pile of short stories published in on a website called Road Junkie. So if you Google Narendra Sethi Road Junkie, you'll find about it, and they're all true. Writing is one of my passions, but I don't write fiction. It's all true, including Indian stories. And so that was Venezuela. Eventually, everything, like a book, everything has a chapter that comes to an end, and it's time for a new chapter. My friends moved out, life was changing, and I had all I had left really was the Jeep and the yacht. And I was sitting there on Christmas Eve with one cigarette left and half a bottle of wine left, sitting in the cockpit of my yacht, and 2 English guys came past and started looking at the yacht. And it's fucking amazing. My letters of my yacht name, I painted them in ancient Greek. She was called Pamela. And one was saying, that is a P. Yeah, it is. That's an M. Is that Pamela? Yes, it is. They worked for one of the, I think, Shell Oil, one of the oil companies, and asked me if it was for sale. So I told them about 15% more than I thought it was worth. And they gave me $1,000 immediately for a deposit.
Wow.
And 3 weeks later, the yacht was sold. I mean, I flew out, went to Barbados, bought my mother a new roof for her house with the money I got for the yacht, and then flew to India, and I bought silk and shirts and jewelry and rings and trinkets, and took a friend of mine whose boyfriend had just walked out from her in England, and he decided to take his new girlfriend to India. So I said, fuck him, I'll take you to India. So I took his girlfriend to India, Michelle. And just to, not because she was my girlfriend, but just to say to the other guy, fuck you. And so with all of the stuff I bought in India, all the trinkets, I became a stall seller in Covent Garden. And I used to dress for the jacket and the tie. And I still have the brand new briefcase I bought.
Really?
Because if you didn't have a license, you weren't allowed. People used to take these big bins and put a flat cardboard thing and sell their wares. So I thought, I'm a businessman. But when you opened my briefcase, I had a sponge thing with 50 rings on it. And I had another sponge thing at the back with trinkets hanging from it. And I had a plastic bag with the shirts. And I would stand there with my arm out and 6 brand new Indian silk shirts over my arm and sarongs and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So that if I saw anybody that looked like a cop, bundle them up, close the briefcase, taxi. I never got seriously, so I never got arrested.
Brilliant.
And I did that until September, so probably for about 4 or 5 months, and the end of the summer. And then I was sitting in a very good friend's apartment, 98 Star Street in London, near Paddington. I thought, fuck, now what? Out of money, no job, no qualifications really. And there was suddenly a phone call from my mother in Barbados saying, David Young wants to get in touch with you. Well, David Young's the chairman that I'd fallen out with and walked out of St Lucia. But now, 3 years, 3 years had passed. And he wanted me to come and run his US office.
Wow.
And he sounded
that's a bit of a turn up for the books, isn't it? After walking out on him
3 years before.
Yeah.
But I cut up my shareholding certificate. Maybe that's what made him happy.
Yeah.
So he sent me an air ticket and I flew up to the States. And I spent 3.5 years in Virginia, in the States, Gloucester, Virginia, about an hour from Norfolk, and ran the US office of his yacht charter company. But we fell out again in 1996. And because I'm a dog lover, passionate about dogs. My family right now are 4 dogs, all rescued. And all my life, except on submarines, of course, I've had dogs. I mean, they're my children. And he mistreated one of mine in the States, and I'll never forget it. It was Christmas time, and he wouldn't let the dog come in out of the freezing cold and snow. So that was it. And so to cut a long story short, we parted our ways. And I thought, oh God, now what? Because I'm pretty penniless. I had a small car, so I had a couple of $1,000 when I sold that. Well, shit, now what? I had 3 ideas. I would either go to India. I was raised as a Buddhist. My mother, I think I told you, opened the first Buddhist Vipassana meditation there. So I thought about going there, and I thought, no, I would have had too much fun in life. So well, I thought I could go to Costa Rica, where I have very good friends still. The same Susanna Bering that introduced me to St Lucia. She lives in Costa Rica, and her former husband. And I could go there, and she offered me a job to speak English because my Spanish is reasonable. And the third one was to go back to the Caribbean, which I'd never fallen out of love with. And a woman whose charter company I used to work with from the States office said, "Get your ass down here yesterday."
Oh, right.
And it was a lady that ran a small yacht charter company here in St. Vincent called Mary Barnard from Slovakia. And she had run this company, but it had been teetering on the brink of collapse for years. And I was on the next flight down to St. Vincent, and I've never looked back since.
Wow.
That's how I've ended up being here for 27 years. But before that, 8 years in St. Lucia and the year in Venezuela, and a bit more up and down the Caribbean. So the best part of, I suppose, about 37 out of the last 41 years in the Caribbean.
So the Caribbean is home now, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. When I go back to England, I last got back to England in 2018. I feel, although I speak English, and of course there are things I miss. The things I miss in England are a damn good curry, an English pub on a Sunday evening in the countryside, with the grass fields sitting outside, a country pub, and things like that. But I was walking down Oxford Street as an example. I mean, I don't own any socks, and I don't own any shoes. I think I've got 2 pairs of flip flops. That's it. And same when I go to England, I don't buy shoes. And if it's cold, I had a pair of orange ladies' socks because I went in the men's department. This is one on Oxford Street, and I asked them. I wanted to get some men's clothes, and it's all brown and black and grey. And the ladies' side was all nice bright colours.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that. So I bought my t-shirts and stuff and everything else in the ladies' department. And but walking down the road in Oxford Street, one thing that we've always do in the Caribbean, you smile at everybody and say good afternoon, whether you know them or not.
Yeah.
And I started doing that in London, and people started giving me funny looks.
I bet they did.
You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah, absolutely.
I love here because, everybody you smile at. You walk past people you don't know. Hi, how are you today? And with genuine love and affection.
Yeah.
It's a very poor part of the world. There's 35% unemployment here, and an active volcano, and it's poor. A lot of people still live in houses with no toilets inside, and all of that. But I would rather live here.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.